Well, good morning. What a treat it is for me to be here. Many of you don't know my history, but education's part of my gene pool. My father is a retired elementary school principal. My mother is a former elementary school teacher. And of course, my wife, Ginger, has dedicated her life to education, and many of you know her. And I won't embarrass those of you that get to work with her every day by asking you to raise your hands or stand. Education is a passion in our family, and it's a passion for me. And as I thought about what I would talk to you about today, and as Sherry asked me to come and talk about this community, and your role in it, and the role that your students are going to have in the future, we tried to assemble some information that not only would enlighten you, but actually enlightened us in the process. And as I thought about how to frame the context for what this was about, it was this title that emerged for me. Our job, all of our jobs, your job, because you have the front row seat to the participants of tomorrow, are our kids. So today what I want to talk to you about is the tomorrow they're going to face, aptly put, their tomorrow. Before we talk about what they're going to experience, first, as Mankato did, I want to set a stage for you of just how great it is for us to be a part of this community and how fortunate we are to be here. Now, if I run this the right way, this one. Okay. First, let me give you some highlights on this economy. I like to refer to this thing, is this one on? There we go. I like to refer to this thing called economic might. Right? That's our strength in the world in terms of our economy. And it's probably one of the best kept secrets, but it's one that's being shared now. We have an economy that produces product that's valued at $4 billion. Many of you have heard the term GDP. Well, ours is $4 billion. That's an end product that's shipped to a customer somewhere. Our total sales in our economy are $6 billion. That's a sizable economy that exists in our regional marketplace, which, by the way, is 2 counties, all of Blue Earth and Nicolet counties. We have a $900 million trade center. A year and a half ago, the University of Minnesota identified the top 4 level 1 regional trade centers in the state of Minnesota outside the metropolitan community. Rochester, Duluth, St. Cloud, no surprise. But the new kid on the block was Greater Mankato. A year and a half ago, but what's even more exciting is about our performance right over here. Our job creation in this community is outpacing all of our colleagues in the state. When we look at the jobs that are being added, the Mankato, North Mankato MSA is adding at a rate on average of about 4%, trailed by St. Cloud and Minneapolis, also in the positive, and then Duluth and Rochester trailing behind it. These are average job growth additions on a percentage basis across the state in our marketplace, and we've been on this ship sailing forward for almost 3 years now in terms of leading the state in terms of job growth additions in this marketplace. That's really something that we're proud of and excited about how we're returning to employment levels in this community that are pre-recession employment levels, and it's a great place to be back to as a community. I get 2 devices today. One to advance the slides and one to point at things I want you to see. Mankato already mentioned to you this Forbes Top 10. I can't tell you how big a deal that is. 2 years ago we were number 25. Last year we were number 11. It felt like a consolation prize, right? Number 10, we're in the top 10 in the country as a best place for business and careers. Top 10. Now what's even more important, right? When we compare ourselves to others in the top 10, we have, against all the others, the fastest and highest job growth against the other 10. We beat all but 2 of them in terms of cost of living, and here's one you're really going to like. Nobody in the top 10 outpaces us on educational attainment. Now that's the most recent. In addition, in the last couple of years, here's a number of other things we've been identified as a community. Top 25% for job growth, bizjournals.com, Dream Towns. Best places for work-life balance. This one just came out a couple of months ago by some organization called Nerd Wallet. I don't care what their name is. Like, the reality is, they said we're the best place for work-life balance. You don't have that without great economic opportunity and a great place, as Superintendent Allen and Bukata have both said, a place that's livable, a place you want to make your home and you want to spend your time. That's work-life balance. 4 times we've been on America's top 100, America's Promise Top 100, 4 times. Forbes placed us a couple of years ago as the best place to raise a family, in the top 15 in the country. And finally, a handful of years ago, AARP, and I don't know about you, but I'm getting close to getting one of those cards in the mail. And I'm pretty excited that we're a city to watch. What that means is that there's a population, a chronologically gifted population, as I like to call it. I just celebrated a birthday a couple of weeks ago. Dangerously close, right? So, but what's important about that is you got to have good health care. You got to have good education. Education K-12, higher education, continuing education, entertainment, sports, theater, culture. All of those things have to be important to attract any demographic. And it's particularly important for that chronologically gifted population as well. This is a tremendous community to be a part of. And of course, you know that in education, you are key to that excitement in this community. I told Zierdt and Boo, when I heard this band playing ahead of time, I said, I need that pep band at our annual meeting. I said, I want one of those. I want to come running into the pep band. That's pretty exciting stuff. There's a lot of energy here, and there's a lot of energy in this community. I have to tell you, people that are new to this community, and you'll get a chance to meet her, hopefully. Dr. Annette Parker, who just arrived here recently as the new president for South Central College. Annette said to me the other day, it's different here, Jonathan. There's an energy, there's an excitement, there's a confidence, there's a communication and a collaboration, a way that this community moves and works that doesn't exist in a lot of places. And I'm still going to quote him to this day, even though he retired. Dan Menden said to me when I arrived a little less than 10 years ago, and some of you know Dan, and he said something you referenced, Boo. He said, Mankato is a big city that plays small. Now, those of you that grew up in a small town, and I did, less than 2,500, I get what that means. It means knowing your neighbors. It means caring about your neighbors. It means working with your neighbors. A big city that plays small, that's our city. That's our community. You're a key to that. Now, part of our role as a community and key to your role is really the main point of what I want to talk to you about today. And that's this tomorrow that our kids are going to face. What does their economy look like? It looks radically different than the one that you and I talked about when we were in their chairs. Than we were facing, what we were going to face about the next 10 years of school, the next 12 years, the next 18, whatever it was going to be. There was a different economy that I was going to walk into. And today we're dealing with something called a skills gap. It's not the issue of do we not have enough people, although in some places that is the issue. It's the issue of aligning the skills that somebody has with the opportunities that are available. I want to share a story with you from about a month ago. I spent a lot of time getting to talk about the excitement of this community, being on the radio and media and talking about the job growth, the economic activity, and of course I don't look forward to the morning when I have to wake up and talk about that in a different way, and I hope that doesn't happen. We're on quite a streak. We want to keep that rolling. But I had a gentleman, middle-aged man, who had listened to me on the radio that morning, or TV, I forget which it was, but he was frustrated. I was talking about job growth and the opportunity in the community. He didn't have a job. He came to our office, came looking to talk to me. He was frustrated. He was mad that I was talking about all the opportunity, but he didn't have that opportunity. So we sat down. We had a conversation. We visited for 3/4 of an hour to an hour. So I listened to him talk. I got a piece of paper, got a pen, and I wrote some things down for him. And I said, look, you got a lot of skills. He had an aptitude for problem solving, an aptitude for looking at a situation, trying to figure out, how can I do this differently and better? He grew up on a farm, and so he had a mechanical aptitude, a mindset about how do I fix things. He wasn't afraid of working with his hands and working with mechanical things, even engines, if you will. But he didn't have any education, any certification that made it possible for him to take those skills beyond some of the other things he was doing that weren't very exciting for him, and that he had trouble being motivated about. So what I talked to him about is there are opportunities for you to work on getting a certification in things like ag, diesel, mechanic repair. You know, our farm community is just urgent. It's really one of the foundations of our community. And the agricultural community is one of the growing sectors with tremendous technological and promise for our community and our world. And there's great demand in that industry for people that can make sure the equipment that's used to harvest our food continues to run. This guy had a passion for it and a skill set for it, but he lacked a credential. See, he was an individual that had the skills, but he didn't have the certification that he needed to get over here on the other side of an employer. So how do we bridge that gap? And that becomes part of our role. Not necessarily pinpointing the students you're going to work with today. How do you tell a 6-year-old, right, what they need to do the rest of their life? I mean, for crying out loud, when I was in 10th grade, I thought I wanted to be a chemical engineer, but I got to tell you, when I was in 7th grade, I thought I wanted to be an architect. The only reason I'm not an architect today is because a guidance counselor in 7th grade sat me down and said, Jonathan, when you get finished with high school and college 10 years from now, there isn't going to be the need for architects that there are today. What they were referencing was this. Today our challenge is we have lots of people available for work, but we have them qualified and skilled in areas where there's a lower demand. What we're lacking is the people with the skills where we have a higher demand, the training, the education. You can be an architect if you want, but here's where you're going to fall. There's not going to be a big demand for your skill set. So if what's important to you is to find a job in the future that's going to match up with your attitudes and your interests, then we got to figure out what else that might be. Well, I thought I wanted to be then an engineer because that was a hot field. And so I went off to be a chemical engineer, dropped out of college 3 weeks later after that because I knew I didn't want to have a relationship with glassware. Can you imagine those of you that know me? Me, sitting in a lab with beakers all day long. It's not going to work. I don't know a piece of glass that will talk back. So I said I got to do something different. I thought I wanted to be in education. My dad was an elementary school principal. I thought, well, maybe I'd like to be a teacher, maybe a principal, maybe even a superintendent. So I went about getting that degree. But I never did that. I ended up going to work in community-based organizations. I was a Boy Scout executive, United Way executive, ultimately ended up in a Chamber of Commerce. It's where Sherry and I first got to know each other when I was in the community of Owatonna. And I was the chamber president, and she was the high school principal. That's how she and I first met each other. And so here's this guy with a high school degree, a high school biology teacher degree, and a minor in coaching, and today I'm in business. Boy, that one worked out, didn't it? Huh? How do you predict your future? So what is it that we can do along the way in terms of helping get the students that we're a part of prepared for their tomorrow? Well, here's one of the things I want you to know. This surprised me. I wasn't aware of it. When we went out and did a little research, this is the projection on the state of Minnesota's labor force, the pool of workers we're going to have in the future. Okay, our aging population, chronologically gifted, are getting bigger, right? And our youth population isn't keeping up. So as people retire, right, our net gain in the workforce isn't going to be increasing. We're not going to have more people entering. We're going to barely, as a state, be keeping up with filling the vacancies that put themselves upon us as a state, right? But this is our community. And what I really like is these red bars. See them? These red bars are the age cohort of 25 to 44. Right? That's a future workforce. And by the way, I think it means even more buildings. Right? This is a growing community, and you know it. And we're seeing the evidence of it. But I love this slide because what it says is we're going to have a labor force here. While the rest of the state is barely hanging on to filling its needs, this marketplace is going to have people in it, which is a great opportunity because it means that we can say to businesses the most important thing they need after a customer, right, that have to have somebody to buy their product, is they have to have people to serve that customer. They have to have somebody that delivers the services, somebody that makes the goods, somebody that interfaces with them. They have to have people, the most important resource they will need after they have their customer. We're a community that's going to have the most important resource, and that's people. And I love the way this trend line looks. Look at this labor force climb. It just keeps climbing. Remember the slide previously? It's going down. That's our position as a community. So how do we help kids today figure out where they're going to land in, particularly when you have a changing workforce? Now, this is a slide that for some reason, Superintendent Allen, when I showed it to her years ago, and I don't remember how long ago it was, but she's never forgotten it. So I'm like, I'll slip it in if she likes it, right? This is something that Barb Embacher, who used to be a part of this district, and I stole her away, because I needed that kind of talent in our office, and she's here today. But Barb has me every year an opportunity to talk to kids, what is it, 9th grade or 10th grade, that we talk to for the career fair. And one of the things that I talk to them about every year is this piece of information. This chart, those of you that grew up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, this chart didn't look the same way. It used to have 20% white collar. In the 50s, this blue was 80%. That slowly has gotten chopped into. The definition, by the way, by this source, is that a white-collar worker is somebody with a 4-year degree and works with their mind. The blue-collar worker definition then was somebody who has perhaps a high school degree and works with their hands. The gold-collar worker, the worker of today and going forward, is the individual that blends together all of that. Somebody who has to have at least a high school diploma. Will probably, likely, does have to have some education beyond high school and will work with both their minds and their hands. This is 60% of the future workforce and the future jobs that they'll need. So you're not done with them here. One of the things that you do is prepare for them for that continual learning. I don't care which source you go to. That was one source. This is another. Georgetown University, similar research that they did. They're saying 35% will need a bachelor's degree, 30% need some college, but the other 35% will need high school and on-the-job training. So everybody's going to need some education beyond when they leave here. But this says some 65% are going to need something in terms of college post-secondary education. It wasn't that way decades ago. So today's learner has to continue learning to figure out what job that they're going to be a part of. What this slide says is that there's a place for everyone. There's a place for every student that you're going to interact with in terms of an economic opportunity for them. Every single one of them has got a place inside of this system. Now here's some interesting data. As a state, we have a population of just over 5 million. We have 2.8 million jobs. 40% of our working adults have a post-secondary degree today. By 2018, that's 5 years. By 2018, 70%, 40 today, 70% of all those jobs are going to require someone with a post-secondary degree. That's a 30% increase and almost doubling the population from 1.1 million to almost 2 million people in our workforce. Remember, our workforce is 2.8 million. Are going to need some sort of post-secondary education to do their job. So you've seen slides like this before. This one caught my attention related to the back slide. 100 students enter 9th grade, 76 graduate from high school. I know our data is much better here. 95%? Okay. Much better here, graduate from high school. 53% enroll in some sort of post-secondary education. By the way, that number that enroll in a 2-year is about 30%. And 25 earn their degree on time, which in this study, on time is 6 years or 3 years, depending on which of those institutions you're at, 4 years or 2 years. 25. That number, based on the last slide, needs to be 70. 70 of those 100 need to earn some sort of degree. 70. Today it's at 25. Here's some interesting data. 70% of the jobs I've already talked about, but look, 63% nationally, 28% in 1973, 40 years ago, only 28%. I love this. Minnesota, third most education-intensive job market in the state. And yesterday, I just saw a tweet from the Department of Employment and Economic Development that said Minnesota is the 6th highest-ranking knowledge job state in the country. 6th highest, based on information technology and educational attainment. 6th highest in the country. Nationally, as I've said, college degrees have to increase by 10% a year by 2018 in order to keep up. Now, this should look familiar to some of you. Maybe not to all of you, but to some of you. This, to me, really drives home the point about how do we prepare our students for their tomorrow. You know that if I line up 10 ninth graders in the front row, 6 of them are going to work in a job 4 years from now, or 6 or 8, whatever it might be. 6 of those 10 ninth graders are going to work in a job that hasn't yet been invented. 6 of 10 are going to work in a job that hasn't yet been invented. Case in point, social media. How many companies today employ people they actually pay to monitor things like Facebook, tweet, do things related to social media? Even in our organization, we spend time on social media. We don't have a dedicated person, but we have a person whose job it is to be participating inside of our social media environment. That didn't exist 10 years ago. Best Buy, 4 or 5 years ago, posted a position for their vice president of social media. And you needn't apply unless at that time it was, I think you had 1,000 followers on Twitter. That was the criteria. That didn't even exist 10 years ago. So this chart, to me, is how we have to think, right? How do we prepare students for fields, clusters of influence, where jobs are going to change? Well, a year and a half ago, our office, in partnership with all of our higher education institutions, all 5, we did what we call the Talent and Supply Study. Talent, Supply, and Demand Study. We asked all of our institutions, count up all the degrees you confer, and what areas they are. And then we asked all of our employers, what jobs do you have and that you have a demand for? And we said, if X number of mechanical engineers are produced annually, let's say 40, through all of our institutions, but all of our employers say they're hiring 60 a year, we have a shortage, don't we? If it says that they're educating 80 and we're only hiring 10, then we have a surplus in that arena. Well, when you look at this chart, I know the numbers are a little small, but as you look up here, this S and this D indicate what our research told us. For example, the career field of business management and administration, our marketplace produces slightly less than 9,000 people with that degree. And our market only hires a little less than 2,000. So we have a surplus of 6,000. In this field, agriculture, food, and natural resources, we supply less than 3,000, but our market hires more than 3. So we could do better. We could produce more with that background. Now this is one that's really staggering. Human services. 18,000, and the demand's only 2,000. We have a lot of people that get a degree in psychology. About 145 on an annual basis, and we hire 2. Now sure, we might educate the psychologists for the rest of the world, and that's okay. We also know, and this hits home for us right here, we also know in education, we produce educators that are far more than what this community and this marketplace can hire. We have a great education program. We're a destination education institution. No fault to that, right? But we have an extreme shortage in education for what? Math, sciences, right? Tells me special education, English as a second language. So if this individual is passionate about education, is there a discipline such as that they could go into? How do we help guide? Remember the guidance counselor said to me, architecture, yeah, you might like it, but there's not going to be an opportunity for you. You want to be an elementary educator? Okay, you might be really good, but you might struggle finding an opening. But if you want to be in education, there are opportunities. This field is the way we have to think about how we're developing our kids for the future. Now, this is really interesting. It's a study that's published by Deloitte. Some of you have heard of them. They asked a group of respondents across the country, if you ranked the jobs, the industries that were most important to our national economy, from a stability standpoint, what they said was manufacturing was number 1. As a country, we believe manufacturing is the most important industry to our country. By the way, while I was working out this morning at the Y, some of you see me there, right? I'm on the bikes and I'm watching the news strolling apart, and there's a report this morning that said U.S. manufacturing ready for a resurgence in the United States. Coming back from China, U.S. is now the highest productivity, lowest cost anywhere on the planet. It's positioned for a renaissance in manufacturing. Well, this country says it is important to us. Number two is energy. Well, then when you ask the individuals, if you wanted to support a new business in your community that would create 1,000 jobs, which one would you be most excited about? Doesn't change. Manufacturing, energy, this changes. Healthcare and technology, for some reason they switched places. Don't know why, but the list pretty much stayed the same. But then, when that group of respondents was asked the final question, if you were to start your career today, what industry would you decide to go into? This is how they responded. Number one was technology. Number two was energy. Number three, healthcare. 4, communications. 5, manufacturing. 6, financial. 7, retail. So I asked ourselves the question, what do we look like in our community from those sectors? When students say, or when people say they want to go into technology companies, are they thinking to themselves, I want to work for Google? Is that what they're thinking? I want to go to work for Facebook? What are they thinking when they say technology? Well, I would argue this list that's scrolling along the side are all the companies, and probably not the complete list, of the companies in our marketplace that are in at least one of these businesses, if not multiple. Here's what I mean by that. We have companies in this community that are in the technology industry. They make things that go inside of devices like this. They make things that go inside of healthcare products, right? They're what we call manufacturers, but they're in the technology industry. They don't get classified there, but they're in manufacturing, right? People want to go into energy. So what is that? Is that Excel? Is that Centerpoint? What do they mean by energy, that they want to work for the energy business? Because this got a lot of interest. This was really high. Well, remember the tsunami that hit Japan a couple of years ago? Knocked out power? A company in this community was called on to produce, I think it was 60 generators in a short period of time to ship to Japan to supply emergency power, energy to that country. MTU On-Site Energy. You want to be in the energy business? Cato Engineering, MTU On-Site Energy, Blue Star Power Systems. All three of them are in the generator construction business. We call them manufacturers, but they're in the energy business. So we have a long list of companies that actually match up with many of these industry sectors. But how do we think about them? How do we position them? How do we help our students think about what are their career opportunities? We have lots of growth opportunities in each of these sectors. You can see the number of jobs in each of them. This was interesting as well. I used to think that the most influential to where somebody might decide to go, because it happened to me, right? Don't be an architect. That was a career counselor that said to me, that's not going to match up for you. What else could you pursue? Right? When I called my parents and said I was leaving the University of Minnesota because I didn't want to be a chemical engineer, they were right here. Right? Influence on what I might end up being. You know, and they said, well, what are you going to do? I'm a smart guy. I'm going to go into education. They're educators. Okay, they're back on the phone, right? So their approval, their influence and where I was going to end up was critically important to me. Well, look at this list. When these respondents were asked, where do you go to determine information about careers and employment opportunity? Look what popped up number one. Internet, personal research, friends, media, well, online social networks, maybe that's media, maybe that's friends. I hope what happens is that people today use these sources to begin to explore and understand, but they use these folks who have relationships with them, who are trusted, that they use them to dig even further and understand. You are critical in this decision about where people go to understand their future employment opportunities. Absolutely critical. So, as I come to a close on your role in all this, and part of this was to enlighten, as I said, not just us but you, in terms of what our students face there tomorrow. This is our role in education, right? I stole this quote. Molly saw this one the other day at our YMCA board meeting. Education is not the filling of the pail, but the lighting of the fire. And you know from the data, every one of these students that comes through our system here has got to continue to educate. I'm in business, and I got a degree in biology education. I didn't stop learning. I can't. I have to keep learning every single day. I read spreadsheets, right? P&L statements. I talk about supply chains. That was nowhere in my biology curriculum. I'm not sure I can talk to you about red blood cells and white blood cells today the way I could have 23 years ago. I had to keep learning, but I had to be lived, right? For business, this is what's important to us, the 3 R's of recruitment, retention, and retraining. This might be your new 3 R's, rigor, relevance, and relationships. And by the way, when I talk to those 10th graders every year, I say to them, I pull out my own phone and I say, look, I text, I tweet, I do all of those things, but nothing replaces a handshake and eye-to-eye contact. You have to have relationships first. You have to build them. Texting, tweeting, they all have new languages, right? Hashtag this, hashtag that, right? We learn that, but it's a shortcut. It lets us get to things quickly, but you can't convey real information through that. You have to have a real relationship. I met with a guy yesterday to talk about agriculture, and he said to me, I need to introduce you to this person. I said, where's the office? He said, St. Paul. I said, well, can you make that introduction? He said, I can do that for you. I'll introduce you through an email. I said, but he's in St. Paul, right? He said, right. I said, well, what I'd like to do is when you make that introduction, let him know what I want to do is come up and meet with him. And the guy looked at me and he said, well, he's a farmer. He loves face-to-face, hand-to-hand conversation. That's what he likes. He would love that. I said, well, that's the only way I know how to do it. So I want to drive to the Twin Cities, sit down and talk to him about our vision and how we can be helpful in terms of that. I don't know how old this guy is. I know how old I am, and I still build myself on relationships. I'm trying to keep up with the population you work with every day because it's important, but this relationships piece is key. Rigor, relevance, and relationships. And these, by the way, you've heard them before. Sherry reshaped my team. We used to call these the soft skills, right? Variety of other names we had for them. Essential skills. Doesn't matter what role you're going to have, what job you're going to have, who you're going to work for. These are what every employer is looking for. Critical thinking, problem solving, communication skills, teamwork, self-direction, global literacy in these arenas, innovation and creative thinking. Sherry and I had an opportunity to talk about 9 CEOs the other day, and that's what they were talking about, is that kind of thing. So what's your role? Hopefully I helped you gain a better understanding about the reality that your students, what their tomorrow looks like. The landscape's very different than what it used to be for you and I, and what they're going to walk into. Part of my job today was to give you that in your toolbox. You can't help guide if you don't know what the environment looks like in front of you. So I hope I've shared some of that with you. I want to encourage you to continue to focus on the new 3 R's, rigor, relevance, and relationships. And obviously, at the end of the day, you need to light that fire. Inspire those students to continue to be learners, continue to go out and seek, and to follow their passions and their dreams and adapt and make the difference in the world that they want. You want success for them, just like you've had for yourself. That's what we all want. And the best thing we can do is help guide them on the path that's in front of them and help shepherd them along towards that success. I thank you so much for what you do in this community and how critical you are to kids and family success and to our community's vitality. Without you, those rankings wouldn't happen. You are instrumental. And so I can't applaud you enough for what you do, and I can't encourage you and wish you the best for this coming school year any more than I could possibly want today, but to wish you the very best success. I know you're going to make an amazing difference, and I want to thank you on behalf of the community for what you're going to do. Have a fantastic school year.